this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
In the last 2 years alone, according to rent.ca, the rent is up 20% or $400 for the average family. And now we learn that construction is in free fall, down 28% last December versus the December before. Will he stop funding bureaucracy and driving up interest rates so that we can bring homes Canadians can afford?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Our housing ambition can be best summed up by the Conservative member for Dufferin-Caledon, who said that it seems that every day our Minister of Housing has a new program, a new announcement, or a new cheque for Canadians. That's exactly right, Mr. Speaker. We continue to work hand in hand with Canadians, with municipalities across the country, municipalities he'd rather insult, to get more homes built faster, Mr. Speaker. The investments we're making, including things like taking the GST off purpose-built rental housing, which the Conservatives voted against, will continue to create more homes for Canadians right across the country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you can't live in announcements and programs. You need homes that have walls and floors and ceilings. The Prime Minister doing another selfie in front of a construction site won't do that. In fact, construction is down 28% in December after 8 years of this Prime Minister's promises and spending. Will he accept our common sense plan to build homes and not bureaucracy?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just last week I was in Kitchener-Waterloo making an announcement for the Housing Accelerator Program for Waterloo. And what the Leader of the Opposition seemed to have missed is we were standing in a freshly completed building for seniors that $33 million of funding from the federal government a few years ago allowed to be built today. We are building things today that people are moving into in the coming weeks, and we are announcing how we are building things for tomorrow, as opposed to him who just chooses to insult Canadians, insult mayors, and insult our intelligence.
After 8 years, the port authorities are only scanning or inspecting 1% of shipping containers leaving our ports, and that led to the case where Mark Roos had his 2021 Dodge Ram stolen. Luckily, he had an Apple AirTag, so he could follow its transit to the Port of Montreal, where he knows it to be. He called both the cops and the Port Authority, both of which said they don't know which box it's in, so they can't find it. So why won't he accept my common sense plan to buy 24 scanners so we can scan the boxes, find the Dodge Ram, and give it back to Mark?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this would be perhaps a little more credible from the Conservative Party if they hadn't cut 1,000 CBSA officers when they were last in government. And they'd proposed to cut 400 more if they had won the 2015 election. The reality is we restored every single border officer they cut and added 800 more. And we're continuing to do the necessary work. We recovered 1,800 stolen vehicles last year. We'll continue to do...
Sorry to interrupt the Prime Minister and to all members. I'm going to ask members please to keep their comments to themselves until they have the microphone or have the floor so that they'll be able to ask their questions or answer their questions. The Honourable Prime Minister has 15 seconds on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, while Conservatives cut frontline border services officers, along with cuts to the RCMP, cuts to police forces across the country, we invested in them, and we're going to continue to do that with $121 million for Ontario, more investments for port and border security. We're going to continue to step up and keep Canadians safe.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
You know, the Prime Minister's strength is not math, but the facts are that we took office, there were about 12,000 working as CBSA officials, and when we left office, there were over 14,000. So 14,000 is more than 12,000 to help the Prime Minister with the numbers. It's true that we cut back office bureaucracy and high-priced consultants, which he has ballooned, and that's why after 8 years, he has increased auto theft by 32%. Will he accept our common sense plan to cut high-priced consultants and hire more front-line inspectors?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I can't help but smile when the Leader of the Opposition talks about high-priced consultants, because it's his campaign being run by a high-priced consultant for Loblaws. When he stands in this place and across the country wrenching his heartstrings about the prices that Canadians are paying for groceries, when his top advisor is in the pocket of Loblaws giving him the same talking points as she gives Galen Weston when he appeared at Parliamentary Committee. Mr. Speaker, if Canadians are going to believe this Leader of the Opposition, he needs to come clean with who is funding his organizations.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's sure getting desperate if he has to blame Conservative campaign workers for the fact that he raised food prices, especially when, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's new marketing director, Max Veliket, did marketing for Loblaws for 4 years. Don Guy, the Prime Minister's chief pollster, works for GT & Co., which collects checks from Loblaws. As does Dan Arnold, his other pollster, getting checks from Loblaws. Are they the ones that forced him to quadruple the carbon tax on our food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Order. I know it's Wednesday, and members are very keen to hear the answer to this question, so I'll ask them to please restrain themselves while the Right Honourable Prime Minister answers the question. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, you can tell it's Wednesday because this morning the members of the Conservative caucus got to hear directly from Jenny Byrne, who sits in their caucus with them, giving them advice. So that is exactly where they're coming. When she is actively on the Loblaws payroll, while at the same time feeding lines to the Leader of the Opposition about food prices and concocting a theory around carbon price and grocery prices that, as the member from Regina Louvain pointed out yesterday, has no basis in fact, we see the kind of torque he chooses to pull.
There. That's not so hard. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, he makes it too easy. He talks about caucus meetings and Loblaws. Get this. The Prime Minister had someone who is his Director of Caucus Services named Julie DeWolf, who is now a lobbyist for Loblaws. Not only that, he digs up a lot of dirt. His chief dirt digger, Kevin Bosch, left his office so that he could go and work as a lobbyist for Loblaws. Would he like us to continue going down the list of all of his Loblaws lobbyists, Mr. Speaker?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It is quite something to watch the flailing of the Conservatives right now as they do anything to try to distract from the fact that their campaign manager, the Leader of the Opposition's top advisor is and still gets contributions and paychecks from Loblaws. This is an issue when he has stood up and pretended to care about food prices, when we hear the exact same talking points come out of Galen Weston's mouth as out of the Leader of the Opposition's mouth on some invented connection between the price on pollution and grocery prices, we know exactly who is behind the Conservative Party.
He unleashed the car theft crisis by bringing in house arrest and bail, not jail, for repeat career car thieves, and by allowing our ports to become sieves where our cars are stolen from, so much so that we're now becoming world famous for the Prime Minister's failures. The Ghana Economic and Organized Crime Office says we are in possession of stolen vehicles. The victims, it's all in Canada. No Canadian agency has approached us directly or made a formal complaint. Will he take the money from the back office bureaucrats and consultants and put it into frontline law enforcement to protect our cars?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition likes to make base political accusations. He likes to talk about C5 and C75 as the reason there is auto theft in this country. The reality is C5 is the bill that keeps mandatory minimum penalties for car theft on the books, and C75 is the bill that raises the maximum penalty on car theft. We've continued to step up in terms of keeping Canadians safe. We will continue to invest in the CBSA and in the resources necessary to counter these challenges. We will keep working based on facts and evidence, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, here are the actual facts. Let's go through them. C5 keeps mandatory prison sentences. Mr. Speaker, they were already in place, put there by the previous Conservative government. They weren't created by C5. What C5 did is it brought in house arrest for career car thieves so they can watch Netflix or perhaps play Grand Theft Auto in their living room and then go out onto the street and steal another car whenever they want. Will he follow my common sense plan to end house arrest for career car thieves?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the Leader of the Opposition's simplistic worldview, someone sitting on their couch at home playing video games goes out and steals an Escalade. That's not what happens, Mr. Speaker. Organized crime is directly involved in the massive spike in auto thefts in this country. That's why what we're stepping up on in investment in anti-organized crime, investments against money laundering that party voted against, investments in more powers and more resources for Ontario to counter auto theft, and indeed more resources for the CBSA that they cut when they last left office will continue to be there.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, actually, people do steal cars when they're on house arrest because all they have to do is open the door and walk out and steal the car. Then there's his bail policy, which allowed the same 40 offenders to be arrested 6,000 times in Vancouver in a year, many of them car thieves. So, will he accept my common sense plan to get rid of house arrest and bring in jail, not bail, for career car thieves? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in all the questions the Leader of the Opposition asked about car theft, he hasn't once mentioned organized crime, which is the cause of car theft in this country right now. And that's why perhaps he's not mentioning it because when we brought forward measures to counter organized crime and money laundering, the Conservative Party voted against them. We moved forward with more resources for Ontario, $121 million to counter organized crime and car theft. The Conservative Party voted against. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to anchor ourselves in facts and data and deliver on keeping Canadians safe.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he wants facts. Here's another fact. Extortions are up 218% since he took office. Right. Why? Because he got rid of mandatory jail time for extortion with a weapon. So now he allows extortionists to go around with guns, harassing small business owners, in Brampton, in Surrey, in Calgary, and Edmonton, where horror stories are unfolding. Will he agree to our common sense plan to reverse catch and release so that Canadians are safe from extortion?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, the situation faced by far too many people across this country around extortion from organized crime is unacceptable, and that is why we are taking action directly with the RCMP and local police forces to counter it. But once again, we see Conservatives falling into the same far-right American trap in their approach on crime that doesn't work, that doesn't keep Canadians safe, that it sounds good in sound bites and attacks, but doesn't actually deliver safer communities. It's like their opposition to gun control and their desire to put assault-style weapons back on the streets. They don't keep Canadians safe. The work we does.
After 8 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled since he promised to lower it. Now we have a brand new phenomenon of the middle-class homeless. In fact, according to the Executive Director of the Royal Canadian Legion of Nova Scotia, members of the Canadian Forces are now forced to live in tents, in cars, and to couch surf. There are 30 homeless encampments in Halifax after 8 years of this Prime Minister. But why would the Prime Minister then plan to go ahead with a $450 a year rent increase to our armed forces members who are already forced to live in tents?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, military members and their families are a priority, and we're taking steps to ensure that they are supported. We're investing $445 million over the coming years to tackle the supply of military housing. And when the Conservatives had an opportunity to support our military personnel, they chose not to. The Conservatives stood up in this House and voted against supporting our men and women in uniform just last December.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is an outrageous non-response to the men and women who put their lives on the line for this country. He rewards them with a tent or a couch in someone else's basement to sleep in. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, there's a 177% increase in Bagotville and a 261% increase in the wait line for military housing. And now he plans a $450 rent increase on the people who protect our country. Shouldn't he be ashamed of himself?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the Conservatives who nickel and dimed our military service members and veterans through 9 years of their time in office and even dropped military funding to below 1% of GDP, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to step up, including with $445 million for military housing in the coming years as we continue to honor and support the women and men who serve our country with their lives.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Honors them with a tent to live in. He honors them with a $450 increase in their rent. Before this Prime Minister, we didn't have masses of military members living in tent cities, Mr. Speaker. They could put a roof overhead. In fact, we didn't have 30 tent cities in Halifax. We didn't have 2 million people lined up at food banks in lines that are reminiscent of the Great Depression. We didn't have young people forced to wait till they're age 40 to get a home. The good news is life was not like this before this Prime Minister, and it won't be like this after he's gone.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Why doesn't he just say it straight out, Mr. Speaker? He's planning to make Canada great again.